Today I'm speaking with the Venerable Kirti Tsenshab Rinpoche about death and dying in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Rinpoche is a highly respected Lama in the Gelugpa branch of Tibetan Buddhism. He was recognized as the incarnation of the abbot of Taksang Lama Monastery in Tibet. He became a monk at the age of 9, studied at Drepung Losaling Monastery in Tibet, and furthered his studies at Buxa in India. Rinpoche is known as one of the main lineage holders of the Kalachakra Tantra. For the last 18 years, he has been living as a renounced meditator in Dharamsala, India. Canadian monk Gareth Sparham is doing the translation. In the West, in recent years, there has been a rapid development of the hospice movement for the care of the dying. Does Rinpoche think that one can be of benefit to those who are dying?
message de maran taba de neba sege de yeng yo ti na ne thabar de mar neba sab chen bo de la ji da maran chwa ta chu ding yi go de neba de la ma men ko mu ser de zga yin de den go maran ga de se go ta ta je chen bo de den yong.
First thing is it's certain these new sorts of hospitals, hospices, which are made specifically for those people who are facing the end of their lives, that besides the general great benefit of hospitals, these have an additional benefit indeed at this present time.
What is the best way that we can help those who are dying or have just died?
Mi shikalamuran de mi densuam ta shitsaba. Koran so pendo chair. Like a chendo yuna, pento chamber lagade, carres, manso chome.
The miss Shikala Casavara.
Ta shikalamota, ta shitsala.
Chitsavi Camdena.
Dini shikalamota, shimatape.
Or it did call that.
Nika nasu pento chendo yuna, nasu so the carriage.
Yeah. Or that day when he bent out Jimbo Younger, they carried his son. Or the message de Maricana Gadilla, Yam Tabani, Din on it, Hubbard the Mar, Yam Taban on the Marichan, Yam Taban Nikavian Batch. Or that in the end, take Kavla, or that you killing Idiana, Marhozang Chu, Ratunda, or Doris, Sandicia. Or that you are Tono Ming Diana, Samsung Butia. Or that you. Some gatun money, some trubuji money, Shayana, Petachibuji, pero the and do take of that, have said Jagadimar, Kertibu Young.
I think there's two things we should keep in consideration. The person who for some time has had a religious faith, and the person who doesn't have a specific religious faith. If a person, for example, has faith in Buddhism, then one can enunciate to them at the time of their dying those things which they've learned to trust and have refuge in. For those who haven't a specific religious faith, the best thing I think to tell them is that they should try to have a good thoughts, try to think good thoughts, not bad ones. At the time when the person's dying and in great trouble, if somehow they can cause themselves to somehow get a little bit happy, feel a little bit better, turn their mind to good thoughts, then there's great benefit indeed in that.
When that in do that you are not, when that you might choose hold on you me in that, you sound of some siege, some Sambutia, Tonio Goya, Jambu Goya, this and the Jigua. When that you choose on Mingi in a young. Whether you Kuso noise and Kangardi, something Kongala, Tindagamara, Kangarju Mayon, something that you might Chipuyoya, Dipuyoya, Monoya Fuji, Damna, Chudonomina, Tim Hengri, whether Tindaga, also Tina Yapuchita.
If I continue talking relative to the two sorts of person. The person who's got a faith in Buddhism already, to that sort of person, one can bring to the mind of that person the remembrance that they have about what they rely on, their refuge, about generating bodhicitta, about tangyong, about stabilizing the mind in meditative stabilization. These sort of things are very beneficial for that person, for the Buddhist person. For the person who doesn't have a specific religion like Buddhism, then what one can say is, think, may everybody be happy, may all living beings be happy, may every living being please somehow be freed of their misery. Those sorts of ideas, general ideas of wishing well to others, these are very, very helpful indeed.
Oda tinda chigdong, da tini nangsi shirakan chigi tamandaga kari yuwari sena, oda chigi chugul hojang chingi, chula tonang yungi tinda yenna, shakala ka chigi sangjiga ke maka tangsani mara zagna, oda sangjiga ke la mara, maka tagan chigi, tila mara jamru chingi, oda tini chigi sangjigan tsendra dang, zangwa samu tinda amjaka nangla mara, oda gogen tinda jiwa yana yung, jiwa shimade yaholna yalan pedak chibarden yung kariwa, oda tinda chiga. Shikala katila. Shikala katila.
Just as the person is about to pass away, given that the person is a Buddhist and has sort of a Buddhist faith, then it can be beneficial indeed to gently say in their presence the qualities that the Buddha has, bring to mind the form of the Buddha. These sorts of things can have a great benefit and cause the person to, in a future lifetime, find a rebirth in a fine place.
Oda tila chigi, ta tini, ta isha tsabaji tila ji, ari ta dwa shimaga nana yukyo jiro, ta barchi tila inga mitu.
So, ori ta tanda ngama shiwa nangan ji ma shingi di mara nomba chiwa lojang yungi oda ji tinda ka komyong yungi ji yenna oda tila ji maka shikala ka tila maka tangsani sanji ji kanda tangkanda tang sanji ji katini shamni mara tila jamru jiya ka mara sandir jiya oda ji nyamne jiya ka tsik samo zangwa samo da mara amjak nunga tuyen ji oda tini sandir jiya dazo mara shikala ka tabshitang oda shiksabi ji so ji pombo tila kongjang mongjang ji mara rangna guchak majamna yung sangwa tangi tang nyamne yungi ji yana tenwang pengi yuwariwa nyamne mengi yana yung zukbo tila mara guchak jeba yana sam chamu di mara shatsu rakwa di chi di yuwari di nanga sam chamu di ni di yuwa yendu tila yung nochon jiga yuwa yendu dati kanyi bishak zangna yung di penpo na ji yung. So, as I was saying then, the person who has thought about Buddhism before, for that sort of person, as they're about to die, if there's
The breath and heart have stopped, which are the usual signs of death in the West. How long is it before the consciousness leaves the body?
Michi de shine ane ujung de ga ujung de ga gadwa ane inya tasam chamode looking de yorwa ta shine sam chamode pardon jingla dutu jingla kuri katsu yore
oda tinda shiwa yendu da chirdang tinda song yuwarwa ji ma lo disang mara jen renpo na dingi oda ji mara zupo di mara se dingi topshik me dingi ma tinda tang oda tini ji yang ma kashi mara lu tarma lu chang chang yin na yang lu mang bo la ma na ne song se ding tin da ge ge de la shini xue ji se ji be na che zu ka xin da dang xiao bo jing me ding yi tin da yang yong se ge wa wo da ji mo tarma zubu to xi yong ni lam sang na ding zubu se mi ni to xi yong ni da wo da tin da ge ge me de su xue ce la我在想嘛，想嘛，什么嘛？点这个人了嘛？写作个的嘛，古讲讲的名义的，写的千里，那个什么长么的，在等的，日本那嘛，的定的，我去点这样个有什么有个人的，点这个日本这个你样的。
I think there's probably two sorts of person one can identify here, probably. For example, if you have a young child, or if you have somebody who's been wasting away for a long period of time, and who's been undergoing, as you might say, a long gradual process into death, then probably the mind, the subtle mind, whatever, won't stay there for a long time. It might only remain perhaps for a day or something, not very long anyway. If a person, however, has quite a strong physique, in other words, that they're in really quite good sort of health, then they die rather more suddenly. For that person, the subtle wind, this mind, spirit, can stay for a longer time, up to for as long as 3 days.
어다 되는 지다 다되니 영 단다가 르니 요아티 니게 나오니 단다 그래서 고지 송시딩이 루디상다다 지 다가 뭐보다 로모보다 나딩이가 미르게 된다 남산 신이 침보만 거가 통미지 연구하러 디 공대다 지 남산 뭐지 촌당 디말 남산 잡는 말 대마당 말 세자가 뭐대요 전부 되게 미신다. 근데 남산남시대 통로 요신이 인도 땡기게 이렇게 거니 대한테 권로 그래와. 근데 근데本来就没你讲的说的，真这个嘛，남산后头个现在个，我在听到人呢，听到个是跟南西的，也人不没得吧，但在员工当罗马不那定的，下上呢，就不没得，也人不没得吧，行动的电脑人个，南西的就不同一个这个地方都有。
Now, then there's another sort of death too, of course. That's the violent death, for want of a better way to call it. The death, for example, when two people are fighting and a person is suddenly murdered, suddenly killed. That sort of person, that sort of very sudden violent death, the person who dies that sort of death is probably of the same sort as the person who's undergone a long slide into death. The spirit, the mind doesn't remain there long. It goes out very quickly. So we can put that sort of person in the category of the person whose spirit remains only a small time.
I
think one way or the other, you're going to find people in one of these two categories, those who remain for a shorter time and which stay for a bit of a longer time.
So just to reiterate, Rinpoche is saying that the consciousness
if you think, it goes without saying, if you had a yogi on your hands, you'd obviously not sort of go up and immediately start disturbing the person. Since even an ordinary person, spirit or sem, their mind, doesn't leave, it's possible at least that it doesn't leave for a period of as long as 3 days, then it's sort of like if you have somebody asleep, you go up and give them a good shake, they'll immediately wake up. It's sort of like that if you can, if the conditions are such that one can possibly not disturb them for a while, then it's obviously a good thing to do.
탐키보지 자야마다 셔찬이 돈이 자니 라바만 청하지 니마 섬그래나 미야 호이나 냠네 용이나 명이나 자니 구정마지가지 자야디 룩소나 착기요.
So that's why there's a tradition in Tibet for the helpers of a dying person. Never mind whether they're a great yogi or yogini or not. That's not the point. There's the tradition that if it's possible to not disturb the person even for as long as 3 days, and if one has to move the body, to move very gently, to be sort of careful with it, not to do things violently and suddenly. This tradition has come about in Tibet on account of this idea.
Wadape didati nojen shikalaka didaji tawla kabyaga dulu gunda dindayo tsaba chisayana tumbunda yuayana shabu kashiya jazana ku ru tomato rundu yuwa te yendi taso masikoni kaliga marten yakthangdi yakpoji tamkiboji masikonadi den taso tumbu yuna taso te kaliga dile jigosi ditashi on chawi.
It's as one, for example, takes away the say the person dies on a bed and so forth, then one's going to take away the sheets and things like this. One's going to take away the mattress and so forth. But one does that as gently as one can too. One doesn't just quickly take them away, but one tries to do this slowly and gently and without upsetting the person who's just died.
Bunaji da poniya tinda ga luksuri warwa makasigan phambodi shikala ka mara ji zubud zo yabo mara detang yabo jigu bunaji dombat zo mara dadajin da mara shisijina dina jiwa yana shatsawa kabs mugto zo mara domya mugtam diwa tinda yonsa karwa makasi yang mugdang dina sino jigu tinda yonga yendu jagduna the Zubundani Martin, the Sunny Martin, Kali, Dagda Wajab, Tidajina, Tashi Yahoyangi, and do Tidaji.
Similarly, when people die, some people die with their eyes wide open, some might die with their eyes closed, and so on. And there's a tradition to close the eyes, to smooth the skin. Perhaps if there's a certain sort of expression on the face, to smooth it out and to make it look better, or to at least smooth it out and close the eyes. If one's doing that, do it with a sort of gentleness, slow movements, not again to disturb the person who's just died, to disturb the spirit of the person who's just died.
Well, that did not be noising, and I moved to take a mar yaboji mar Tadujigu at the noising, cut as well I am, the Dada Chitira Magina, Makasi Cardone, Martina Gidivayana, Makashi Shinoji, Kayuara, so Congressatan, Tamkiwojigu.
Similarly, for example, say the person died with their mouth wide open and their eyes wide open, and then somebody comes into the room to sort of pay their last respects to that person. They're going to sort of be taken aback and perhaps frightened. So a good method to stop that sort of thing is indeed then to close the person's mouth, to sort of make them look a bit better, so that when a person comes into the room to look at them, they don't look so bad. Then it doesn't frighten that person, and it doesn't disturb the atmosphere in the room.
Then she just gone by that Guya Yujiwa, Jagarson, message in Pombodi, Shetsarzan dinner, Pombo, Marinidia Nazer, Marashon, then Chinto Gamata, Pokus Hayana, Mokanga Tombo, Shetsarzantoni, Yamasama Jagachi, Yamasam Tony, Zubodi Marajozona, Lopazo come back again to the name, dumb, release over Zogri. Tati, Tizoyada, Yonchma, Titadu de Hotela, Mashu Mona, Shakalaka. Lopazo and the Reggie Hondiana, Lopazo Kali, the Jir come Genji, Combatzo come Genji. The Namagina, Nam Tomo in Chapajan, Shondi Satan, the Jir come to Gora. That day, Nam Tomo is sanity, the Chigu Ayo, Mena, that Tagatagigo, and that is Guayo.
Everybody has their own sort of burial habits, of course, and in Tibet we had ours. One of the sort of things up there was that after 3 days, then you're going to take the person off. The limbs would be put in a position like this, and also the legs brought up. So it could be cold, right? And if the hands and legs were stretched out when the person died, it could be rather difficult to get them into that position. So slowly over 3 days, you'd make sure you could work them up into that position so that it would be okay at the time to have the person taken away.
That in the Shuari coming, Shun to know Shuari Matan. Charles the Kalat in the Chiguay.
I doubt there's much need for that where you all come from.
What effect does it have on the consciousness if the body
Shoot champo là, because je pense que shoot champo.
The Samlo Toya to the Yamarion, Ramsamba strong to you, they go on Jonji. The Manayon to the some Tamoyam Kaptela, those Tuesday Jinamara, common sick, Gangan with them. No as it did, but I'm Chongi Jakudiva noising with Noah Kura Maji, Karisako, Gangamon, and Yermato, the Gujak Jaguna Kali, Kali, Tashi Yahujinamata, Shichimutaya, Davia, the Nakina Joyang.
First of all, if the person was an adept, had some sort of meditational abilities, they're trying to remain with a sort of... It doesn't see things which are...
Matona Sabo some Sangarena, Manta Reshu with the Tinala, Dimichi Young Yuayendu, the tomato, the Kandi Takiwarisena, Oda me Namshi Tamusijiti, Chalak the Tombe Tagla, Tamar Namshi the Ming at the Shiva Capsayon, Pago Tuli Carabon, Kam Carabotan, Margaret Tamarabot, Tinin Zomna Tivila Koran Mare. Namshi din Zongu Yuarwa, Tisum Zongu Yuayendu, Tisum Zomba Nanjan, Namshi Sajidi, Chalak the Tombe Kapsa, Kam Karabodi, Mandone, Wada Techigoni, Kam Karabodi Bakuyo. Wada Kam Marabodi, Nabu Chicken on the Tot Pajimar Yangu. The Najayendu, Namshi the poet talking. Wada Tiratina, Poma Bodi, Tiratagos. Yama Kashida, Tina Melmi, Young Yuarity. Particular, then I'm going to touch it.
Again, I'm bringing to mind that there's two sorts of person. The person whose mind, spirit leaves almost immediately upon the time of their death. Putting those to the side, talking of the other sort of person whose mind might remain until as long as 3 days. It's said, of course, that the mind becomes enclosed in a smaller and smaller dimension, and that dimension is said to be defined by a red and white sphere. And the red and white sphere enclosing this mind, when these spheres, as you might say, come apart, then the red sphere is seen to have come apart, and thus let the spirit go free or go forth by a small amount of blood coming from the nose, and the white part left through the bottom part of the body. However, what you do find sometimes are people in which there's no sign of any blood or anything from the bottom part of the body. It can happen, but usually you do see that sign, and it's a sign then that final death has occurred.
Oh, that
before it takes rebirth in another body.
Renta Chigdan, Tonta Chigni, Sanguiva, Deyandu, Renshu de Venaji Malan Sombayana, me that dental when a dental then after dental then the Sabuji Shirgi and Givarua. What I renta Chimara Dingi renta the Penchima deep. that diva renta di tirajina musa. That tonta di mara lamsong makashi cho wasrasi sanin toni timata di jualing jing yang. That tonta. That diva na yang di barma barla, that chisu kashikin toni jualing yang yuari, shabu chicken toni, ling yang yuari, tennis on the shabu chicken me some after chicken toni yang yuari, taking a rent on the manasa yang yuari, what they do, the renta chick, tonta chick, or that dinner come watch you. The money part of the rent on the money part of.
So the shortest amount of time that a person will stay in that sort of disembodied state or newly embodied state is a period of it can go on for as long as 49 days or 7 weeks. That's the longest a person, say a person is going to be born as a human being again, the longest they'll stay in that sort of disembodied state of a human is for 7 weeks. The shortest time that they can stay in such a state is for really just a few seconds or moments. It can happen that they're say you have a person who's going to be in the intermediate state, disembodied state, for 3 weeks, 21 days. What will happen is every week, after every 7 days, you undergo a sort of a death process, will die and again be, as it were, reborn in not such a gross way, but undergo a process of dying and rebirth. And this is what will happen.
Oh, that in the Hindu, that and that you are not in Pardo, Tetsin Rawati, Renta, Halinama, Reshu in a renta tendazam, Tonshu and a tonta tendazam, Tinoni Paraparna Yungi, then Pardo Kronga no cigar, then really that the Drakasia Demi and then really Nani, young Shama Particuano, Tenda Yabati Tenda Chick, or that the Pardo necessitated that in the
So in a word then, there's the person who might immediately take a rebirth, a person who might be in an intermediate state for a long period of time. For the person in the intermediate state for a long period of time, there's rebirths, quasi-rebirths we might say, which happen one after the other every 7 weeks, where the person goes through a sort of a minor death, a minor rebirth in an intermediate state form.
That didn't on him, Shimi Chivalati, Renton, Nathan, Guadi, Caradisena, Chiva Shamaji Layala, Wadaji Karzago, Chiva Shamalayala, Michua Ling, young Yori, Hichua Ling, young Yori, when a Tembichua Ling, young Yori, and do, they don't the Chivada, Lamsan Timata, the Chi Chachayo Mario, Chia was chained over the Niku Yorimata, Chi was chained the Maniba in that, and I was you annoying. Shamaji Shirgira, Renshuti, Chigo Sandina, Chia was chain Maniba in the Rembojima Dig. But the Lamsan Timata, the chain Nina, Penangasi, Delin Lugayana, the pass the Lamsan Timata, the Ragayana, Lamsan Hodeka Dogra. But that pass Marana, Chitokaji Gugona, you are Nikuna, some Gugona, the Gugurimata, do Chacha Dina.
So why this process of sort of undergoing minor deaths and rebirths in this sort of ghost-like state? The reason is because, say one's karma is going to cause one to be reborn as an animal or a human being or whatever. Well, you also have to have a certain set of conditions met in order to find yourself in such a state in the future. Now I give an example. Say somebody's going to set out on a trip from here to Delhi. Okay, they're going to go, but they might not get their ticket. They have to wait until the condition of the ticket's ready, right? So some people might have to wait a day or two until their ticket comes through. So it's sort of like that.
What is the best way to prepare for one's own death?
Try to check out. Try to check
Sorry, so long oda dena garasigo dadigjiade tangazu chugutangne shuayena chunyamne jingi kawande shina da chujiade sheaga mari shakalaka dadigyengi warwa renshudi garesena sanji thoyaga dadig deli tozi nyeshudi kurwali thoyaga dadig deli thon nyanda wode chishimi dadig oda deli mari nyade garesena shakalaka kangar chishu yondina dadigdi chujiade yengi 다 추마징이 지였나 영 니스 가까르와 추마싱이 영 샤와다 다르지 고고요 레디 때였나 추지 맹이지였나 추라도는 많고라인데 추지고서 정원 지산다고 말이와 때인데 다 추고 예보데 가르르세나 삼성 부지고 어다 말아 러지고 몰라면 고작고 어다 된다가 서 찌부노니 마진 로아였나 시야가 다르기 때리 하양이와 말이와 대왕 다르기 연데 that Dadujiala Chujingi Daduji, Chulakono Mimi Daduji, Young that Tenikanji.
So again, one has to think about two sorts of people. There's the person who's spent some time in their life earlier familiarizing themselves with practices, religious practices. And then there's the person who's in their earlier life hasn't done anything like that. For the first sort of person, the person who's already familiar with religious meditational practices, that person, indeed, at the time that they see that their death perhaps is approaching or whatever, for them it's indeed to turn their mind to religious practices, which is to say to bring to mind those religious thoughts, the various sorts of meditation or religious practices, and to, as you might say, put the mind through its paces of bringing those to mind. What about the other person, though, the person who in their life hasn't really ever thought much about religious things at all? Then it's the heart of religion that somehow that sort of person should try to get hold of. And what's the heart of religion? It's basically being kind, feeling good, being kind, thinking well of others. And that's the heart of it. So to somehow ennoble one's mind by turning it to think well of others, to hope that others have good come to them in their life. That's really the essential thing in any religious practice. So if people who've never before thought about that can somehow do that, then indeed that would be the best thing that they can do to prepare themselves for their death.
Nambino and Dugayana, Papunaji Kadi, Nambino and Nambiti Ninkayona, Bariag Ninkanda Yoyana, Yamar and Yediga Daddy, Manon in Chontayaga, Daddy, Goyara, Yedi, Nambino in Chomiala, Yedigo, that the dagger, Daddy the Cardi, Nambiti, like Shosayana, Yon Chontayana, Choyala, Rapadi, Yedigo, the dagger time and do. Then Kalasaya Mena, Kalasayaji, the dagger time and do. That the Conga Diag, Tadika Savati Karesana, Pishayakoji, Tadu Yakoji, that they are not Tadu Naka content, Tadu Yakoji, Petina.
Maybe I'll give you an example for this one if I might. Let's say you've got a plane trip planned. Okay, so everybody knows you could get into some serious trouble on a plane. The thing could go down, right? So you've got to get yourself a parachute. Okay, so you not only need a parachute, once the planes go down, you've parachuted to Earth. What you're going to eat, you've still got to get yourself a little food together. So you get yourself a sort of a little care package together in case the plane goes down. But if you ask, what's the main thing you've got to get together to get your care package together? You've got to have some money, right? If you don't have any money, there's nothing you can do.
When I do go. Chuchingina, Dino Nimaji, Chuga Don Sianda, and Sanjigan Zebada, Yami Chigua, Korka Don Siana, Jeremo Guna, Kasi Nikumari, Sambu Chakara, Tinaga Tadiki. Yon Chugotono Mimi in Ayo, where Don Yimbudashi, Mana, Jitanga, Kalasayanda, Tina, Mushiba, Messiah in a Conga Gawangara, or that Tinaga Tadikina, Conga Yakara.
It's sort of like if the person then is has some knowledge of religion from before, they'll enjoy listening to stories about the Buddha's excellent qualities, what he did. for others, helped others, and so forth, that'll cause joy in the person's mind. If the person's not like that, then just talking about how others have helped others, how somebody did something nice for somebody else, that can make them feel good, bring joy to their mind. So those two ways are the ways sort of we prepare.
Then Nabino, Kalasaya, Minito, Kalasaya, Yuna, Kangamon, Tadgiwa, Diamond. Then he Robert so young, Kalati and Yuna, Robert so Gabo. Then you can't go.
I think maybe I misunderstood and mistranslated a little bit. When the person gets in the aeroplane, then if they've also got a little bit of food for their friends as well,
Nabino, Drogoning, Sakani, and Lanza Kaptikatadina, on to Kayvarwa, when I ready to Zeni, Jagatadumina, Januayam Bivarwa, Sayat in the Tagan, Nabinani, Mumani Tamadina, none in your say.
I guess what I'm trying to put across is if you're on a train, then you can sort of get something from the station. But if you're up in the air in an airplane and you didn't bring everything with you, you can't sort of rush outside and buy it, right? So there's a bit of a difference. You've got to get ready before you take off, as it were, because once you're up there, there's not a lot you can sort of rush outside and get ready. Yes.
What I did, Shakalaka, Tadriti, Mumani, Tadriata, Kawayinsico, Son of Mobutan, Tadumajina.
So what I'm saying, in other words, is that it's a situation where you have to prepare beforehand, and you can't just sort of get it together while you're in the middle of it.
What is the Buddhist view of suicide?
That Ramsi Japasi, that number two Jing, number two like Jing, that my Dushi Biwa. So Makasi, Sambino, so Kanaki, Wayana, then he controls. Controls in do, controls the Sasana, me some Tayadi, Tagatkis over the Indumari, Niana, Manina Mania, Dicatino over the end, so says about the end. So Sevayana, Mergent Seba, Dicati young Biwa. The end, so Sena, Magic says about Dicati young Biwa and the number two, Jingiana, the newer Chambodan, the Chambu young. That number two Jingi Mangi and I young, Chu Kitchen, you are married, so Saturday, so soon, maybe so I and do, so Saturday, Rona, Sachimbu, you are. Mutila Mara, Tonji Sejayana, the Tonji, the noise, Rangaron, Tonji, and do the Maduaji and the Chakio.
So, if one's a Buddhist, then it's really a great fault to kill oneself. Why so? Because really what's happened, isn't it, is that anger has come up. And that anger directed against others can lead to one killing others. And that's a great fault. And one's an important person. One's a living being. And to destroy a living being when all living beings are so important is wrong. And to hurt anyone, oneself included, is wrong. And so, as a Buddhist, it's wrong to hurt oneself, to kill oneself. And then, what if one isn't a Buddhist? What then? Well, one's still an important person, isn't one? To harm an important thing, an important person like that's wrong. So it's just, it's wrong, and it's considered wrong, dikpa in Tibetan, to harm a person. And it's just simply not right to harm somebody.
pen somebody when sosola pentayomi, Majena pentayomi, that you been Modayan and Namdayana, Dinaji, you are in so contour Savayana, Sanida, Namdayana, Modayana, and some Metatayana, Chu Nitan Gina, Manduka Chimbuchi. Chu Nitan Kimani in Dosan Chimbuchi Tong you are. Dosan Chimbo the Tonga into Pisha Mambuchi, Sosola, Maber Zoy Savani, Chukumani in a Dukia Marua. Pisha Mambuchi, Pisha Stiona, Niana, Savat Tagivari Mata, Lamsa Pisha Mambuchi, Pisha Gumon Buya Martila, Ravana, Lamsa Metra Tanzana, Manduari.
Maybe I'll give another example here. It's sort of like, say you have a new motor car, a new car, and it's a good one. And if you're a Buddhist and you get into a ferocious rage and you completely wreck the thing, that's wrong, because to be in a rage and out of a rage to completely destroy something like that is just considered not worthy of a religious sort of mind, to allow yourself to be completely overcome by anger. But what if you weren't a Buddhist? It's still absurd, isn't it? You took so long to get that money together to buy that car. You had to work so hard. And it's just considered absurd, isn't it? To work so hard to get such an excellent car and then to just completely throw all that money away. Even if you're not religious, it's still absolutely wrong and absurd. So whether you're religious or not, it's absolutely wrong and silly to kill yourself.
That never touching with a mechanism that Dinaga Chagin on me and do Dinaga never yam talk the summer Dinaga seminar Ratundo Cotonda over that in Hoton Yapu Matadi, Messagiti, Nasaga, Kangamobuyan and do Rangaron Sayanda, Rangaron Tapadam Chayanda, Dinaga Kayang, and do Mumani Hosu Yapotona, then they are.
So, it's thinking in this way, if somehow you can help people who are in that tremendous suffering that people can get into, real hardship, because people can, of course, within such a condition of tremendous upset and hardship, they can indeed kill themselves, they can hang themselves, they can do these terrible things. If over a period of time you can introduce them to ideas about how their mind's working, then you can really be a tremendous benefit to them to help them out of those difficulties they'll find themselves in.
For people with severe pain, is it wise to give injections or medication to reduce the pain that may have the side effect of lowering the level of consciousness or clouding the mind?
The main kashidia, that's no.
They commanded the Dinago Nasa Shichemujab, Kabza, Cherton Shuayana, those Nasa Shichemudi, she told it on Yanda. The Manayoji Shichemunyambi, you had it, Soaga Masternikin. Mara Zendua in a Kabja Sakara, Dinayana, those in Pendakau young green. Young some of Tamiji, some of Tamiji, some of dinner, some of like Joinji, what they and do Mr. Dinala Zigni, some of Tamidon, Dinajila, Karasigo, some cook up the Makawaj in the Kamajunayak. Young some of Matamiji and Mr. Kakai and do, there are those. Zaminga sort of the Jamna, Pengu, what that? Did I in touch the Penguisiamandi, touch the Nokurisiamandi, Tagatagina?
There's no blanket answer here at all. You have to look at the individual person. The excruciating pain, if somebody's in excruciating pain, to somehow relieve them of that pain is obviously a good thing. If you have a person with a tremendous spirit or a tremendous capability, somebody who can sort of bear it and bear up under it and keep sort of a clarity of what's happening to them, then to sort of, give them a soporific which takes away that clarity maybe it's not the thing to do, but it will completely depend upon that person. And a person who's got a capability to sort of remain with knowledge of what's happening and not to just be sort of made more vegetable-like. Is that a strong way to put it? If they can bear up to it, then it's obviously better to leave them to. But if the pain is so excruciating, then obviously it's better to alleviate the pain. So we'll have to go with each specific case.
Oh, that didn't do that. That didn't do that. Never touching good. Then he shafts you a lot. I did simply Tamchila, not a young boy. Turns of Birk Mari. They in a some on the Leguayana, Nasadi on Yalamar. Jimmy give a toxicity and do, or that to Karaseko. King and Nasashan, some sugar, I say, Fortune on it, the Yakuang, the Yakuang, kick down. Or that they need to Ronki Chut on Mingy and a young Nasasajity, Chuyongia young Yuari, Chumingia young Yuari, and do some treat in a pair you are married. Daily Mar some Kibuji, Monoyakwanda, yes, or that the let you are in a Pano young Grisina, the never go near mean to Tongo on the senior, but also Tona, then I am Pangua. Then it you did Ganger, Nasa, she children do now, that you 70 matter, nothing on the Maton, Monoyakwanda, John. We nothing then on it, some Jacongala, someone did not you manure in a monoja. No, I now so soon as I know what the same change yellow, nothing on the good choices in it, Monoyakwanda, Jamna. Which money in a Pentayo. What are they? Tomboni Rosijavandana. Some long in Bashariaga, without the good work of Yana, also Yapo, don't tell the Yapushita.
So, also though, if when the person first comes into the hospital, if they're a person who has some familiarity with Buddhist meditational practices, then as they begin to experience this pain, if they are capable of bringing to mind ideas such as the pain is because of certain reasons, certain conditions. The conditions give rise to the pain. If they are capable also of bringing to mind ideas of mind training, which can really strengthen the mind, sort of build up the mind, to say, I'm capable of all sorts of bearing all sorts of difficulties. If the person has some familiarity with these practices, they can sort of find within themselves a sort of a way to laugh at things which ordinarily would be excruciatingly difficult to bear. So that those sort of practices, if they've done them before, one can sort of try to nudge them in the direction of those practices and sort of waken up those thoughts which can allow them to be able to bear otherwise what seem to be incredibly difficult situations. What about the person who's never had the opportunity of such practices, of doing such practices? One can mention such things as really, it makes no difference whether one believes in a religion or doesn't. Everybody at a certain point gets these horrible pains, the pains of dying and so forth. It really makes no difference what you believe, you're going to get them. So in a certain sense one doesn't need to get so tied up in them and worried by them. One can sort of try to distance oneself from and see that just like everybody else, it's happening to me too.
Listened, Mamaji, Jitchikotoki, Yamari, they and duty, some treating in Pengamari, daily Marasami on Boji, one of your Kodajak, some change Yala, Nasan, the Yamat for Yinjina Gumtiat.
So, not only that, if even a person who's never really thought about religious training of the mind before, can probably get their mind, at times at least, around the idea, if I'm upset, it isn't making my pain go away. My being upset isn't relieving my pain. So, at least try not to upset the mind. You will have to experience it anyway, but try to somehow let the mind not become tied up in it. And then beyond that also, one can start to think like this. May this pain, sort of prayers, one can start to make prayers. May this excruciating pain never happen to anybody else. you just keep going, just may it never happen to anybody else, and you keep making that prayer. Or if this pain ever happens to anybody else, may they quickly be relieved of it. Those sort of prayers, even if a person's never been religious in their life before, they're great prayers to make, and they can be tremendously beneficial in the mind.
What that did I do? That didn't got as a good. Don't was a duona. What that you in China's Sambi Denimer, number Sanju, Chuanyang Lenji, Denaga Toko, changing emergy, something non taba, what that number Sosonaji, never touching, shall touch chudding, teach it, man conjumar, Signa Panta Yorasi, Dena Concher Manguay and do, Dela Tenimer, Cardi, Mahobanaji, Zubu Capsa, Denaga, Yan Taba. Shakalaki, Nebata Soda, the Shashishuaga, Lagnetar Capsa and Nayon. Other crowns of Tomer, Menkon and Hematak, the Sotonji Capsa, Masu Tomer, the dragon, Charity Tomaton, the Sokanga, number Sanji, Chula, Hosanji, Temdi Goni, yes. They and do Masu, number Sanji, Joni, Dagden Yamji Sanji, yes. Sanji Sanda, Dagden Yamji, what that? Nyamni jiaga chete chanosu shanda shuwa yens. De yendu chanosu muni samlo tauna ji soso dapo mingi, tangi mingi tinda yenna maso chanosu pama nangye. Jiaga maso samlo tauna chanosu shabshi shiga yuwa yens. De nangye chanosu yang maso shabshi shingin doso maso padang maga saba nangye ji samlo tauna. Shasonga yenna maso dapo jakare, rola dapo jakare, 마시베 값을 전화서 공변쟁이 지거리 시베 값을 전화서 공변쟁이 지거리 때인데 전화서 펜타 친구인 사이즈
what one can come to, that being upset within oneself doesn't help oneself, that somehow thinking of others and not, how to say, bearing up because of seeing the importance of others, and bearing up in such a manner that one doesn't allow one's concern with oneself to completely affect one's mental state, but regardless of the hardship that one has to bear relative to oneself, the importance that one's giving to others is such that it somehow diminishes and diminishes the importance of what's happening to oneself, and gives one an inner strength. If one can somehow impart that to others, then indeed the benefit of this whole project, this whole idea that one is undertaking will be great indeed.
What that did I do? Marangumini chance did I man charge Zoguada, did I man to Piwada. Sini, that mountain did I never touch and I shall see at the Jomatilla, monitoring Marine Tabani, Maragasio. The Yuadi Cadresina was a number of Sanju chewing in booty, Sanjuji, Sam, Dinoni, Davian Yamji, Ron Yerwer to Jiwara Siji and do Yamnejina, Gum Jamni Yamnejina, Tinibudi. Timazi, Langing Materna, Charazimar, Sabajutsin, Shashi, monitoring Davian Yamjigo. Davian Yamjigan, Sabas in Nayana, Metin, Daki, only Davian Yamjigan, Mamma would Sabachis in that, Mitilang with the Jiggy. Dinner is it, Maria Hoyangari, only Comchala Suraman and Daki, Chance of the President.
So finally then,
Masi, money, Chance. Charges
what you're doing comes out of the whole presentation of a religious meditational path, then the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, all those beings are certainly backing you up in this. So you shouldn't think you're doing it alone.